Hello, everyone. Hi there. If you're just joining us, please note that remote attendees can put their questions in the Q&A pane, not the chat pane. Chat pane's not being moderated. And we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. So welcome to the next session, Organizing the Digital Environment to Support Neurocognitive Differences. Neurodiversity presents a range of thinking styles, and there are ways we can think of organizing our Canvas environments and assignments that will make things easier for all our students. Here to talk to us about how to increase accessibility for diverse thinking styles is Dr. Adero Allison, the Assistant Director of Disability Resources for Sales at ASU, and London Skiles, an instructional designer with ASU's Ed+. Please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you, Kathy. If you'll click the slide, I'm going to start with Disability Resources. Oops. We are Student Accessibility and Inclusive Learning Services. So, yeah, it's wrong on our slide, too, so oops. Anyway, I'm Adero.
And I'm London.
Next slide.
So we've heard a lot of people talk today. We've seen a lot of presentations, and everything is driven by a desire to meet the charter, right? And we think about what I want to draw attention to is by who it includes, right? And how they succeed. Throughout the presentations today, we've heard about designing from the margins. We've heard from students about the barriers that exist for them to have access, full participation. These are all the kinds of phrases that you have heard today. And we're specifically going to talk about some of the things that you've heard in those conversations, but within the context of neurocognitive differences. And we are going to talk about those to demonstrate to you how if you design for any thinking style that should come into your classroom, that you are going to benefit every student that you will come in contact with.
So we have an agenda because I think an agenda's not in learning outcomes. But you can think of it as learning outcomes because we're going to talk about neurocognitive differences and defining that. We're going to talk about the impact of design decisions, and we're going to talk about design decisions to improve the student experience, because all of those are really why we're here, is improving student experience. Next slide. Okay, so when you're defining neurocognitive differences, a lot of focus is put on labels that indicate what a disability is, and I really don't focus so much on what the disability is in my mind. I focus more on where the limitation is. So it could be mobilization, gross motor skills, manipulation, fine motor skills, cognition, how are you taking information in, how is it getting out, sensation, and then the integration of all of that, the internal versus the external, and bringing it all together. Next slide. So when I look at the impact of design decisions, I'm looking at, for especially this neurocognitive purpose, I'm looking at how new information is taken in, that's that input, how the information is processed, we call that learning, how the information is stored, that's memory, and then output, how is the information recalled and presented? Because when I work with students, sometimes they are students who got the information, understand the information, know it backwards and forwards, but you asked a question and now I can't get it out. You know, so there are a variety of different things. Next slide. I'm going to talk about Jake. Jake likes learning. In high school, he did well because his work was always very organized. Teachers provided packets of materials to work on, and assignments were always due on Wednesday afternoons. Jake never missed an assignment. When larger projects were assigned, the high school resource teacher helped him create a calendar of steps to accomplish his work, and so it would be turned in on time. When Jake got to the university, he was overwhelmed immediately. It was difficult for him to find assignments in Canvas, as they seemed to be in different places in each module. Once he found his assignments, the instructions sometimes seemed vague and left him wondering what he was actually required to do. He especially had trouble in one class that had changing due dates for every assignment. The syllabus indicated modules varied in length, and this added to Jake's confusion.
All right, we're going to trade off a little bit because as we do these student scenarios. So as we progress through the rest of the presentation, Adero is going to give us a kind of a use case, right, for a student, a fictional student. And then I'm going to talk about design decisions. As an instructional designer, I have conversations about design decisions with faculty all the time. I want to reiterate, and we've heard this numerous times, what works for one student with a disability may not work for another student with the same disability, right? So when we're looking at these design decisions, I want you to think about them more in terms of, these are the options that I have. These are the things that are going to benefit my students. And as I'm having conversations with my students and we start to identify their barriers, this is like a toolkit, right, that you can pull from. It's not prescriptive, right? It's not a checklist. It's a toolkit. And so think of it that way. We also can't cover everything in, 30 minutes now? So, all right, so Jake is very common. How many of you were Jake when you went out of high school? Yeah, and you got me. I mean, I was that way in high school too, if we're gonna be honest. But, right, so Jake is a very common student. Jake may or may not have a diagnosis, and we've heard from students, we've heard from other people about the inequities of being able to get that and the challenges and the barriers that exist. So as designers, as faculty, we can make the choice to start meeting these students where they are, regardless of whether they have an identified disability or not. Thank you. So for Jake, a consistent layout. Now we're specifically thinking about the digital space, so a lot of this is going to apply to whether you are teaching an I course or an O course, so whether it's an online course for online students or an online course for our campus immersion students. But if you are a fully in-person and you utilize Canvas, this also applies, right? So think about it within your own context. A consistent layout. This is how is a student going to navigate your course. And I want you to think about it from large scale to small scale. Large scale is from beginning to end. The moment they enter your course, how are they going to navigate from day one to whatever the last day is in your course? How are they going to progress through each module, right? This starts to build up a routine for students, right? And what it allows them to do is focus on learning the content and not on learning how to navigate your course. All right, so what else? Clear instructions. We're going to talk about this a few times. Clear assignment instructions, what does that look like? We've heard a lot of using headings and using lists. This allows us to chunk content in meaningful ways that students can digest. Okay, step-by-step instructions. I'm gonna be real honest, again, like everyone else before me, I'm not here to talk poorly about faculty, but this is probably one of the areas where I get the most pushback. And I wanna talk about why step-by-step instructions are so important. Because you want your students to know what to do. That's it. You want your students to know what to do. You,
You really don't want them to get an assignment and go, she said do this, but I don't know how.
yeah, no, we don't want that. We don't want emails, right?
Not
How do I
supposed to
do
guess.
this?
Not supposed to guess.
Yeah, yeah. Spell it out for them. Because what that does is it makes sure that they're giving you, as a faculty member, what you want. And you can focus on the learning. Sample submissions are phenomenal, right? Sometimes we can give the best examples, or we can give the best instructions. But remember, if we're working with students with processing issues, they may not understand, but if you show them, this is what I'm looking for, now they have a model, right? They have an archetype that they can refer to. Clear grading criteria. I could talk for 8 hours on rubrics. What I will tell you is this: be specific and include mastery levels. To get this many points, this is what you need to do. To get this many points in this category, this is what you need to do. Have criteria and have mastery levels. Shameless plug, if your department has an instructional designer and you want more help with that, contact them. All right, minimize change. We're like, well, my syllabus says tentative. Yes, it does. But that isn't an open invitation to just keep changing the game, right? We're trying to build consistency. So we want to minimize change, but if we have to change, we want to make sure that there is regular communication. And in an online class, we sometimes forget that, right? Right? If you've been in a campus immersion class, and you're a faculty member, or you're a student, how many times does your instructor say, hey, don't forget, XYZ is due so-and-so, right? It's like a common thing. It just kind of flows. That often gets left out of the online environment. So think about that. Communicate that change. All right, let's look at another student.
Right. Michelle. Next slide. Michelle has trouble getting work in on time. She goes to her classes, although she sometimes arrives late. Looking at the calendar for her classes, she sees new assignments are posted each week, but cannot look ahead to plan for the next week. The larger, project-focused assignments completely throw her off track. Michelle wants to be successful in school, so she is asking for tools to help her stay on track in her classes.
All right, so next slide, let's look at some tools that are some design recommendations that are gonna help Michelle. I almost said London because they're gonna help me. I like literally almost said London. All right, what really this comes down to for Michelle is executive function, right? If we hear that word a lot, or those two words a lot. A quick definition, it's just a set of cognitive skills, right, that influence behaviors. That's a very broad, there's different areas of that. You can Google it. How do we help support students who struggle with executive functioning? Provide checklists. In an online environment, make them digital, make them downloadable, provide alternative formats, because students are going to want to access those in different ways, okay? Now, a checklist isn't going to work for everybody, right? Canvas has this wonderful feature where you can create a page and you can turn it into a to-do. It's a little box you check, and it actually adds it to a student's calendar based on the date that you assign. It's just one little feature, one checkbox on a learning materials page that reminds them on their calendar, oh, right, this is coming up, okay? Announcements, I already addressed this, but like communicating with your students. Yes, it may be a self-directed course, but students still want to hear from the human on the other side. Post announcements, help them, right? We're all learning. We want them to learn. We don't want them to not learn simply because their brain didn't quite process what we needed them to process. Regular feedback, smaller formative assessments. For Michelle, this is so important because it helps her manage each aspect of the assignment. And Michelle gets feedback on each aspect of the assignment. This can be peer feedback. This can be faculty feedback, right? But it's an opportunity for Michelle to check in, right? And this, we're gonna do weekly check-ins. I have a really good example of this from a former colleague of mine. To check in and say, hey, am I on track? Like what, you know, and as a faculty member, I can say, hey, you're a little bit behind. What can we do to help you get moving, right? What's hindering you right now? Weekly check-ins. I'm gonna do this very quickly. I had a faculty colleague when I was teaching that used to do weekly check-ins, and it was like 3 questions, I think. And it was like, what's one thing I learned? What's one thing I found interesting? And what's one thing I have a question about? I think those were the 3. She's probably gonna message me later and be like, no, those weren't it. But those weekly check-ins for students, it was great because she got to see, oh, are there things that I need to maybe make an announcement about that a lot of students have questions about, okay? And flexibility. We've already heard students say flexible due dates, right? And I know I was that faculty member that had the bolded, I do not accept late work, even though my work was always late in college, right? I was that faculty member. But guys, life gets lifey. It just does. Flexible due dates are a fact of life beyond school. That's all I'll say about that. One is more about a communication, right? It's not really about flexibility, but if a student comes to you, like our student panel earlier, right, who said I could contact a faculty member and be like, there's no way I can make this deadline. Assume positive intent. We're so quick to be like, no, this was the deadline, you should have planned ahead. Well, yep, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but we didn't. And now I'm asking for help. So assume that positive intent from your student. All right, let's look at another student.
Before we go there, you know, I want to say I took a Spanish course when I got here, which was really exciting to me to actually take a course because I'm kind of self-taught, which is frightening all by itself. But in the Spanish course, we had this book that was a digital text, and I think I missed the first assignment because it only showed up in that publisher's digital text on the day it was due. And somebody sitting next to me in class had to show me how to find those assignments so I could go backwards and actually do them and have them turned in on time. So imagine if everything is only showing up at the day it's due and your student has trouble planning ahead, so every time something's due, that day they're cramming. That is so, so difficult. Okay.
And can I just add to that? Can we just banter? Does that work? As someone who is neurodivergent and has struggles with some of these executive functioning things, I can't tell you how freeing it was to go to an instructor, right? I have 2 master's degrees. One was fully in person, one was fully online. Talk about a difference. But when I would go to a faculty member, the difference in, yes, I am so sorry that that has been your experience. How can I support you? Because I know that this work, I know that you do good work, right? And so having that flexibility and having that openness with your students and that communication that so many people today have addressed is important. To communicate with your students about what do they need.
And I've also talked with a number of graduate students I've coached. When you approach a PhD, everything shifts. So if you've ever tried for your PhD or thought about going for your doctorate, the whole process changes. And that's the experience for a neurodiverse person every time they go from one class to the next class, and the whole canvas changes. You have to start everything all over again. And it's just important to understand that. Okay, so next slide, Luna.
I didn't have my mic on. I was over here just kind of resonating with Luna a little bit.
Yes. Luna uses they, them pronouns. They listen to online lectures, then realize they've lost focus and missed something. Not sure what, something was in there. The same thing happens sometimes when reading journal articles or textbooks. Sometimes even the way assignments and modules are written can be overwhelming. Work that should take just a short while must be repeated several times before they are comfortable they have heard what the instructor is talking about. Sometimes when reading they get caught on one point, and other times they just don't know what they are supposed to be learning from a particular passage. Luna doesn't have trouble staying on track with their video games, but those are active and engaging. They would really like it if they could find a way to stay focused while listening to lectures or reading assigned material.
I too have no trouble concentrating during video games. All right, next slide. Let's look at how we can support Luna. Chunk content. I'm going to stress this so much. This is about cognitive load. If you don't know what cognitive load theory is, it says that the brain can only take in so much information at one time in focused thinking. And we need to chunk that content. We need to present it in smaller segments. So how can we do that? I've already mentioned like how you can build in headers and things like that. You would be surprised at how that helps students go, oh, I'm just focusing on this one section. I don't have to focus at the scroll bar that tells me I've got, 3 hours of text that I'm gonna have to get through because it's this big, right? Right? You're giving them a cue, just focus here, okay? Shorter videos. The research tells us that if it's under 15 minutes, even better. If we can keep it under 10, we comprehend more, okay? So I get this question a lot, but my lecture is 30 minutes. So how can we help take a 30-minute lecture? Well, we can do one of two things. We can split it into parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do when we talk about accessible videos for Luna as well. I'll get there in a minute. Actually, I'll just go out of order and jump right there. We can create accessible videos for Luna. You can chunk content a lot of times by providing timestamps. So Luna knows exactly where they need to go back to, where they left off. If they're taking notes, they know they can put a timestamp so they know where to go back to, okay? Adding captions to your videos. A lot of people have talked about this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. Definitely check out some of the previous talks if you haven't already. I use captions. I use them to help me process information. Yeah, please do.
When we were having trouble with the captions earlier, my boss came in to help us figure it out, and he said to me, "Is anyone in the room using captions?" And I said, "I am," because I use them to help me stay focused, to stay on track with what's going on in the room.
Same. I also use them for focus. Knowledge checks. There are a lot of tools, and I'm kind of excited about the next presentation on AI tools. I think it was for neurocognitive or neurodivergence, if I read it correctly. I'm kind of excited about that presentation. But there are tools available. If you are teaching a fully online course, you will have access to a tool called PlayPosit. That's just one example that allows you to build in knowledge checks. It doesn't have to be graded. It's just an opportunity for a student to go, oh, did I learn that? Did I not? Oh, I need to go watch that again, right? It's not up here, but I'm gonna add it. If possible, allow your videos to be downloaded. I should probably just write that on the screen. So that students don't have to be online to watch them. And then avoiding unnecessary background music. I don't know if my face got picked up on the camera there, but as someone who struggles with focus myself, I can tell you that, like, if there's background music or images or movement on a video that isn't purposeful, I'm gonna add that, because the follow-up question I always get is, but I like to use this to reinforce the point. That's purposeful. I'm looking at this in terms of unnecessary, right? Just try to avoid them as much as possible. And then active learning. All right, with Luna, if you remember from the description, they often couldn't understand or remember or make the connection between why something was being included. Adding context. Add context to your images. Explain to your students why you are including that image. What does it mean for them? What do you want them to take away from it? Because I promise you, if you have 20 students in a class and you don't guide them, you're gonna get 20 different interpretations. So provide context and understand that what might be easily understood by one student may not be understood at all by another, right? Ask guided questions. There are tools that do this, but as you present an article for your students to read, give them questions ahead of time. Say, this is what I want you to think about as you're reading through this, because now they have something to focus specifically on, right? And they're not having to decide and decipher, what do I need to learn? What am I supposed to take away from this? We're guiding them through it. Same with videos. Hey, this is why, take a look at this video. Think about it in the context of this reading. Now we've drawn connections, right? Or think about it in context of your own experiences with, and we're providing that context, that framework for them to stay focused. And then I already mentioned some interactive tools. Active learning helps focus. I'll go to my video game example. When there's like the cutscene, right? Or whatever, and it's going to like the different segment of the game because you finished phase 1 and now you're going to phase 2, right? It gives you like context or like reminds you what you need to do, right? There's the tutorial at the beginning, like all this stuff. Those are things that help. Interactive doesn't just mean I'm physically interacting, right? It's any way that an individual is interacting with the content, and any way that that tool is enabling them to interact with that content. I think that's actually all of our students.
Yeah, that's all the students. And before we ask questions, I do want to touch on, there are a lot of executive function skills. There's working memory, organization, planning, and time management. And because the way we think is on a spectrum, anyone could be dealing with a difference in skill level in each of those at any one time. And they may not have a disability that's been diagnosed, so they may not get an accommodation for that. So it's really up to us to figure out how to work with these students. Questions?
There are already 2 in the QA, so I'll start with those. But then if anybody in the room has a question, please raise your hand and I'll come over to you after these 2. So this is from Joanna. Do you have an example of a to-do list in Canvas that would be really helpful for an undergrad course that they're assisting with?
Yes.
Joanna Simone.
Say again?
Joanna Simone. I hope I'm saying your last name correct, Joanna. And it would be best for you to maybe email or Slack you for that example? What do you think?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, but I can tell you, I'll describe one, but then also feel free to email me, and am more than happy to help share that out. Wow, that was not very well said. If you mess up, just acknowledge it.
Yes.
Yep. So I had a course, I have many courses, that at the end of every single module, the instructor builds in a to-do list, a page of every activity. They also provide it on the very first page of the module that says these are the activities that are coming up. And so it kind of brings the module full circle, right? So it says these are the activities that you're going to be doing in this module. And then the student gets to the end, and the last page in the module is a page that is a checklist. Hey, these are the things you should have done if you haven't done them. And because you marked it as a to-do list in Canvas, like again, there's a checkbox, you'll see it in there. When you're in that edit mode, right? You can assign a date. The student's gonna know, oh, this module ends on this date. I need to have all this done by this time. And it's such a great way to bring that student full circle.
And also, when you're looking for things in a module, I had an experience, well, I used to work with alt format, and I'd sometimes assist in finding videos for people to process. And the class that struck me was the one where the instructor, first of all, knew how to do tabs in Canvas, which I didn't know was a feature. And every module had a tab with the course materials for that module, which meant that I didn't have to search every single page to find videos. They were all in the modules tab. And if there were no videos, it said, no videos this week.
Thank
You mean that instructor used a consistent layout, that even if there weren't videos, they had a tab that said no videos this week?
Yeah, the tab was for materials, so all the course materials were in there, and if there wasn't a video, it clearly said no video this week.
Why do I even have a job?
Because nobody else is doing it. There you go.
Well, this kind of goes to your to-do, and I knew this would come up in the chat as well. This is from an anonymous participant, which is fine. But doesn't there need to be some adherence to deadlines, as that's what you will encounter in real life? Otherwise, all over the place, will they take advantage, etc.? If someone has an emergency or something like that. But shouldn't they also learn organization techniques too?
So here's my thought. Do you learn organization techniques from failing your first year of university?
Boom.
So if you are brand new in whatever course, whatever university, whether you're a first year or a fourth year, you may have transferred in, but you've never been here. And all of a sudden you've got these deadlines and you're trying to get them done. You need to have time to figure out a process that works for you with the way the material is presented in this setting. Now, when I work with students who are requesting time accommodations on their assignments, I always warn them that regardless of what their instructor allows them, the class has an end date. If it's not all in, you've got a problem. So,
I will also add to that, and this is gonna, I'm gonna draw on my faculty background, but also on my instructional design experience and my learning theory background. The question that I would challenge that statement with, if you saw me speak earlier, I said I would always say, like, do you mind if I challenge you on that, right? The challenge that I would ask is, yes, students should know how to stay on track. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? I won't go into my why should statements. Shouldn't be used. Is organization what you are assessing as an instructor? Is it an outcome of your course? Is it an objective of that module? And if it is not, help a kid out. I cannot stress that enough. I'm never getting asked back. I'm just not. Like, did I mention I'm neurodivergent? And that my brain just, but like, if you're assessing that, if it's a desired outcome, by all means. But if not, let's focus on equipping students to learn what you want them to learn in the course and what the goal of the course is.
Any questions in the room before we transition back to the QA in the chat? Because there are a couple of things that came in. Okay, we'll come back to the QA chat. We have not forgotten about you.
Can I say London Skiles told me so if faculty members wonder about that in the future?
Can we go with a little bit more vague? If we could just call me LD, that way there's no like actual surname attached to that, then yes.
I've got a question. This is kind of on the student side. So you're talking about, a lot of these things are not diagnosed. People don't know that they have them. How can a student learn about the way that they process information? Where are the resources for that?
Oh, that's funny. Well, let me first say that a lot of people couldn't get it diagnosed if they wanted to because they don't have any money. They learn about it because they live it every day. They know what's going on. I went for, I don't know, let me see, 46 years knowing that I had really big problems with numbers, not sure why, but if you give me your phone number, I have to say it out loud while I write it down, because if I don't say it out loud, I will write something backwards. And finally, a friend of mine who was learning a new assessment tool was able to assess me, but it's not official because she's a friend of mine, so it can never be used anywhere. But she confirmed that I was not crazy, it really was happening. So the student knows what's going on. There's just not an access to assessment for everyone who needs to know.
And I'll jump in with my own story because I also went 4 decades without a correct diagnosis. So I had a diagnosis, but I have multiple divergent neurotypes that are co-occurring. And I remember, I would tell people all the time, like, the world is just hostile. Like, oh my goodness gracious, how are people in the world, right? And then I was fortunate enough, and I recognize this privilege, to get a formal diagnosis that is now correct. So what would I tell that student? You know what your experience is. We know ourselves. We know how we experience the world, right? approach it from that standpoint. This is how I'm experiencing XYZ. And just learn about that experience. And I guarantee you, if you read about others with that experience enough, right? Or you research that experience, you're gonna learn more about yourself. And you're also going to, whether you get a diagnosis or not, one of the things, we're specifically talking about neurocognitive and neurodivergence. Yeah, we love self-diagnosis. Yeah, most of us. I don't wanna say all because we're all different, but I love self-diagnosis, right? Like, because you know how you're experiencing the world. And I think that, yeah, that's.
Hi. I don't know if it's a question, but more of a comment. The psychology department here at ASU does offer testing. It does cost money, but it's significantly cheaper than going to a neuropsychologist, because that's where you would go to get that kind of diagnosis. So it's an option. The other thing a student could do is go speak to their healthcare provider, and they do get free healthcare here on campus. So that's another option, is they could have a conversation with them, because if they are prescribing medication for it, for example, they'd have to have some kind of diagnosis to be able to do that. So that's another idea. And then third, if they're under 18, they can go to the public school. Although they can't make any sort of formal healthcare diagnosis, they can tell them that they can get services. So that's another space. And then and then the whole self-diagnosis thing, thank you for saying that. It was validating for me, thank you. I think that's it.
So are you speaking of the clinical psychology? Okay, Dr. Barton does not do autism at all, but he does do learning disabilities, ADHD, all of those, yeah.
Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. I'm gonna hit the QA online real fast. Janice just wanted to mention, we regularly have students ask librarians to interpret their assignments. So this is just reinforcement that it isn't really a question, more a reality check that students are not understanding. It's often not clear to me either what is expected of them, which is telling. Follow-up to that, anonymous participant. I understand the need for step-by-step assignments, but there's also needs to be a space for improvisation and creativity. Many jobs expect you to problem solve and create, not follow a manual. We're not teaching students so they get a good grade in school. We're training them for the world outside. You can comment that on just a second. And then Sasha, I'm super flexible with deadlines. Should I ever worry that I'm working against a student's motivation by being so flexible? I want to be supportive of my procrastinators and urgency needers too. And I'll let you just kind of wrap it up with all three of those together.
30 seconds?
Yes.
1 minute, how's that?
Wait.
Oh.
Yeah, that's too many questions for me. I know, that was a lot. The one in the middle, what was that in the middle?
Step-by-step
Yeah,
instructions.
not being
and
Okay.
too specific because you want to allow room for creativity.
Improvisation and
Yes.
innovation. It's important to let the student know that that is the goal. I mean, that is part of the assignment, is for you to use your brain and to think of different ways rather than me telling you how.
So I come from a composition and rhetoric background. I provided step-by-step instructions for my students that still allowed for creativity. And what I mean by that is I would say the first part of your essay should be an introduction that does X, Y, Z. How they do that, it's relevant to their topic, it's relevant to what they're trying to communicate, right? The next part of your essay should focus on X, Y, Z. But again, it's within their own context, so I'm providing step by step so that they don't miss any parts of the essay, but I'm not telling them how to write their essay. And I'm not telling them this is how many sentences you need to have, and this is what you need to write about. I am just providing guidance so that that student knows all of those points need to be made in my essay. And then there was one final thing that I will talk about. Am I doing a disservice? Was that it? No. 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 I could expand on it, but I'm out of time. So just trust that the answer is no.
Thank you, ladies, so much for your deep knowledge and experience. We're going to take a 15-minute break. So a nice long break. Feel free to get some snacks, some coffee, some tea, rehydrate, take a walk. We'll see you at 3 o'clock for the last few sessions.